This is not a drill, folks. Nintendo just released a trailer for the Nintendo Switch 2. We knew that this was going to be coming, as Nintendo did say that they would be making an announcement before the end of the fiscal year in March 2025. But still, actually seeing this trailer on my feed had me shook. For a moment I thought it could have been fake, those people who make fake accounts that look like actual companies or people. But no, this is the real deal, so let's get into this trailer. First and foremost, yes, it is going to be called the Switch 2. I didn't think Nintendo was going to do this because adding 2 at the end of console names just wasn't really Nintendo's thing. They don't make Nintendo Entertainment System 2s, they make Super Nintendos. They don't make Wii 2s, they make Wii U's. However, I did say before that calling it the Switch 2 was the smart decision. Keep the branding the same so that everyone knows what it is right off the bat. Though, I will say, I do think the logo is a little bit uninspired. It really is just a Nintendo Switch logo with a 2 next to it. The trailer itself is actually pretty cool. The whole thing shows the original Switch basically transforming into the Switch 2, and the Switch 2 appears to have some cool new features. It's not too surprising that the Switch 2 screen is larger. The original Switch's screen is kinda small, although I personally didn't mind it much, as it made the console a lot more portable. But having a bigger screen is an improvement for visibility's sake. Another improvement is a much better looking stand. The stand on the original Switch was pitiful. It was super flimsy. Every time I used it, it felt like it was gonna snap. This new one for the Switch 2, at least from what it looks like in the trailer, seems a whole lot more durable. And it also looks like you can potentially adjust the angle of it to give you more viewing options. One interesting new addition is from the trailer. It looks to me like the console is going to have 2 USB-C ports, which if it does, that is a sneakily really cool feature. It looks like there'll be one port on the top of the Switch 2 and one on the bottom. Not only does that potentially give you more orientations to charge the device, that could also mean we can use one port for charging and the other one for wired controllers, even if the console is not docked. Probably the highlight of the Switch 2 is the new Joy-Con design. These new Joy-Cons are bigger, of course, to match the new bigger screen. Also, it appears these new Joy-Cons aren't going to slide down on rails to connect to the Switch like before, and instead, they're going to attach to the side with magnets. While I do like the original Switch's attachment method, trying to get the Joy-Cons to hook up to the original Switch could be a bit janky at times, so this new magnet method does seem a bit simpler and more reliable. Though I do wonder if these new Switch Joy-Cons will be as satisfying to connect to the Switch 2 as the old Joy-Cons were to the original Switch. Because even if it could be a little wonky at times, it did always feel good to attach the Joy-Cons to the console on the original Switch. The new Joy-Cons also have new strap attachments to go along with them. These straps look really interesting because in the trailer they show the Joy-Cons with the straps sliding on a surface. So perhaps you can use these Joy-Cons like a mouse. Could this mean that the Switch 2 is going to have an internet browser? A mouse could also be really useful for first-person shooters. Now, I know for some of you all of this stuff isn't new because I've heard that there were various leaks surrounding the console, but I deliberately didn't look into that stuff. I wanted to be surprised, and man, this is a really cool surprise. Thinking about it, a mouse isn't actually a bad idea. I mean, the Joy-Cons do have 2 shoulder buttons, which could work as a left mouse button and a right mouse button. I guess I should give my thoughts on the overall design of the Switch 2. It looks pretty clean, although it basically looks the same as the Switch 1 if you squint your eyes. The Joy-Cons do seem a bit more rounded, if only slightly. The dock for the console also looks more rounded, specifically on the top edges of the dock. I couldn't really tell much else about the new dock though. Speaking of accessories, it seems like the Switch 2 will have a Joy-Con grip controller like the original Switch. That way you can use the Joy-Cons like a normal controller, which is nice. Hopefully third-party controllers that were compatible with the original Switch will work with the Switch 2, because while I don't mind the Joy-Con grip of the original Switch, I much prefer a more standard feeling controller. The Joy-Con grip felt a bit too small. I also don't want to pay the high price for a first-party Switch Pro controller. I'm guessing Nintendo will release a Switch 2 Pro controller, and it probably will be more expensive than the original Switch's Pro controller. Actually, speaking of the price, I am very curious as to how much the console and all of its accessories are going to cost. I mean, with inflation, everything has to be more expensive than the original Switch, right? Maybe $100 for both Switch 2 Joy-Cons and $80 for the Switch 2 Pro controller. As for the console itself, I honestly don't know, but I'll make a guess and say it'll cost $399.99, $400 essentially. The original Switch launched for $300 and the base version of the Wii U was also $300. So I highly doubt Nintendo is going to be able to keep the price that low for another console generation. Actually, speaking of the Wii U, I wonder if the Switch 2 is going to have multiple versions at launch, like a base version and a deluxe version or something like that. The original Switch eventually got a budget version with the Switch Lite in 2019, which was essentially what the 2DS was to the 3DS, a scaled down console that lacked the gimmick that gave the console its identity. In the 2DS's case, it lacked the 3D, and in the Switch Lite's case, it lacked the ability to connect to the dock. Then there was also the Switch OLED that was released in 2021, which had an improved screen, along with some other quality of life improvements to the original Switch's design. So I'm curious if Nintendo will release a Switch 2 Lite right out of the gate. Both Sony and Microsoft released digital-only budget versions of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X respectively, so maybe Nintendo will make the Switch 2 Lite digital-only. Speaking of digital only, the Switch 2 of course will have a physical game slot, and as Nintendo announced earlier, the Switch 2 will be compatible with Switch 1 games, both physical Switch 1 games and digital Switch 1 games. Although they do say that certain Switch 1 games may not be compatible with the Switch 2, so I'm actually kind of curious what those games are. At least to my recollection, most of the time, if a new console does have backwards compatibility with games from an older console, there is at least going to be one game from the old console that doesn't work on the new console. But speaking of games, Nintendo did show off a new game in this Switch 2 trailer, and it looks like a brand new Mario Kart game. Mario Kart 9, I guess. I did predict that Nintendo would be releasing a new Mario game as a launch title for the Switch 2, but I was anticipating it being a 3D Mario platformer like Odyssey or Super Mario 64. However, that still isn't off the table, as Nintendo did release Mario Odyssey the same year that they did Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, so we could still be getting a 3D Mario platformer. We also don't know when this Mario Kart game is going to be released, though I'm guessing it will probably be a launch title given how successful Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was on the Switch. They could always drop 2 Mario games as launch titles, but I don't think that's super likely. I'm honestly curious as to what they'd even do with a new Mario Kart game. I mean, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is just filled to the brim with content. Considering the Switch 2 will have backwards compatibility with Switch 1 games, you will probably be able to play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch 2. So how are they going to be able to pull people away from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe unless this new Mario Kart has all of 8's content at launch? I guess the last thing I want to talk about is that Nintendo announced a new Nintendo Direct presentation on April 2nd, 2025. That's supposed to be giving us some more information about the Switch 2. Obviously, I'm going to be looking forward to that. Hopefully we get a release date then. I gave a prediction before that we'd see the Switch 2 launch in October 2025, and Nintendo did confirm that the Switch 2 will be launching in 2025, so I could be right. Though I do wonder if Nintendo plans on waiting a whole 6 months from the Nintendo Direct in April to release the Switch 2 in October. I guess it's a win-win because if I'm right, then I get to pat myself on the back. But if I'm wrong and the Switch 2 is released earlier, then it's still a win because I get to play the Switch 2 earlier. Nintendo did announce that there will be some hands-on events for the Switch 2, so it'll be cool to see what people's first impressions are. In any case, I think that's a good place to wrap up the video. If you want to watch more videos from me, here's a few more that might interest you. That's all I've got to talk about for today though, so thanks for watching y'all, and have a great rest of your day.